they get censored. I'm going to give you guys a pre-warning. Everything I'm about to tell you is 100% based off of my own opinion, 100% based off of my own historical research. Everything I'm about to say is not dogma, so therefore you should not interpret it as such. And 100% what I'm about to say can be viewed as conspiratorial, and that's okay. My intention of telling you what I'm about to tell you is not to change your belief system, and what I'm about to tell you is not meant to change your... it's not to introduce a conspiracy theory to you. Regardless of which, you can do your own research, and you can validate whether what I tell you is valid or not. Do your own research, okay? I give a warning. What I'm about to say to you all is 100% not meant to be taken as a dogma. So with that forewarning being said and needed to be said, without being said, so in case TikTok freaks out about what I'm about to tell you, I'll tell you guys the truth if you really want to know. Listen, you guys want to know about the Illuminati. Look, first off, there were 3 people who founded the Illuminati. We're talking about the Bavarian Order of the Illuminati. We're talking about the late 1790s, right? You're talking about your Adam Weishaupt, your Mayer Amschel Rothschild, and Jakob Frank. Mayer Amschel Rothschild is one of the major founding members of the Bavarian Order of the Illuminati, and Jakob Frank I'll get into in a minute. Regardless of which, they were disbanded by the late 1790s because they were accused of fixing the Battle of Waterloo. So fixing a war, basically like you would fix a football game, where basically you have one side of the football team throw the game, as it were. The Battle of Waterloo is the battle in which the French battled the English. And essentially there was a spy from the Illuminati that was there, of course. And they battled each other, of course. And the French lost, but there was a spy who fled to England and said, hey, look, 16 hours before the battle ended, they said, hey, look, the French lost. But the Rothschild family, which I'm pretty sure many of you have heard of, again, I give my forewarning of discredence. You do not need to believe what I'm about to tell you. It's 100% open to your own interpretation. They believed... so a spy returned there, and the mayor and returned the Rothschild family. They had many stakes in the Bank of England, and they ultimately began to selling their shares. Now they were told that the French had lost, but they act like the French had won. Well, if the French had won, then ultimately the shares of the Bank of England would be diminished into nothing because the French are coming. They're ultimately going to come to conquer. So they began to selling their shares off immediately. They bought up their own shares for pennies on the dollar. And ultimately, this caused a herd effect in which many other people began to sell off all of their shares. And they began to sell their shares off. And they bought up all of the shares. And ultimately, they monopolized the Bank of England. They acted like the French had won, but the French had lost. They acted like Napoleon was coming to conquer England, but he didn't. He lost. Because they were funding both sides. And ultimately, they overcame the Bank of England. After this, there was an investigation that was launched. They found that the Order of the Illuminati was accused of essentially fixing a war. And Adam Weishaupt, who was one of the founding members of the Illuminati, had to live the rest of his life in exile. He was a wanted man, and as I said, he was wanted because he was accused of fixing a war. Now, this is when the end of the Order of the Bavarian Order of the Illuminati, which was held by their symbol as the Owl of Minerva, the Owl of Athena, etc., etc., etc. The question you need to ask about are the other 2 individuals. So Mayer Amschel Rothschild, if you guys don't know who that is, he's the founder of the Bavarian Order of the Illuminati, whatever that's worth. Do your research. Second person is a person named Jakob Frank. That's your real question. You need to look up who that person is. I'll tell you like this. Okay, first off, before I even tell you about this, I've already told you enough about the Illuminati. If enough people in here say, I want to know about Jacob Frank, then I'll tell you. But because of its excruciatingly sensitive details, I'm not just going to mention it. So if enough of you guys ask, I'll answer. Again, I'll give the same warning. What I'm about to say could be 100% interpreted as conspiracy theory. What I'm about to say is 100% skeptical. I don't want you guys to interpret what I'm about to say to be dogmatic or to infringe or whatever the case is, right? It can be chalked to sheer conspiracy theory. It's up to you to believe me what I'm telling you is the truth or not, ultimately. Jacob. Okay. A bunch of people want Jacob Frank. Okay. And Blue Bunny, I don't know if you're here, but if you are here, say something. I'd be more than honored to have you here. Okay, listen. Before I even talk about Jacob Frank, let me give you guys one cheers. Assuming my live doesn't get shut off. You know, if TikTok just randomly shuts my live down and I disappear, you know why. So I'll give you guys that clue. Maybe that'll encourage them not to. Baruch Hashem. Cheers to you all. May you all have a wonderful drink, wonderful beverage. Okay, so listen. Stay safe. I try. Okay, I'm gonna tell you guys about Jacob Frank, because you guys are asking me, okay? Tom ordered in the Book of Yara. Thank you so much. Cheers. Cheers to you as well. What do I drink? Water. I drink a lot of water. I also drink wine from time to time. I don't really eat meat. I do like legumes, beans, and etc. I want to see you tomorrow. I will be here to teach tomorrow. This is just question and answer, but enough people have been asking me about the Illuminati and etc. May a cup never be empty. Thank you. An ever-filling cup. Alkaline water, yes. Where do I get good water? I filter it, if that's to idiot fail. Okay. Enough of the side comments. Let's get into the straight matter of the details. Listen. As I said, please, Lord, do not have my TikTok banned for what I'm about to say. It's 100% what I'm about to say can be listed as conspiracy theory. What I'm about to say is not meant to infringe upon your own personal belief system. What I'm about to say is 100% not to be taken as absolutes, right? I encourage every single one of you to do your own research. So I give this warning ahead of time that what I'm about to say is not meant to be interpreted as absolute dogma, nor is it meant to be here to promote a conspiracy theory. Okay. What I'm about to tell you is to simply share with you an alternate timeline, an alternate way of thinking about things. So this is Jacob Frank guy. All right, listen. There was a guy named Shabtai Zvi, and he was basically proclaimed himself to be the Jewish Messiah in the year 1666. Now, in Judaism, they reject Christianity, so Christianity is completely ruled out of the mark. And there's two essentially messiahs, Mashiach ben Yosef, Mashiach ben David. I'll get into it in a different time. Regardless of which, the Shabtai Zvi character proclaimed himself to be a reincarnation of Mashiach ben Yosef. And ultimately, he proclaimed himself to be the Messiah. And in the year 1666, he ended up being arrested. Now, he traveled to Jerusalem, and more than 40%... First, let me explain the story. First, he approaches the Holy Land, and while he's in the Holy Land, he meets a prophet named Nathan of Gaza. Nathan of Gaza kind of becomes his advocate, his teacher of sorts, who preaches about the coming of the Messiah. He sends out letters to all of the European, Rabbanan, and tells them, basically the Messiah has come. They all study the secrets of the Zohar. That text I'll completely get into in a different time. Regardless of which, Nathan of Gaza tells everyone the Messiah has come. He has a dream that he will meet the Messiah. And then he meets Shabtai Zvi right after this. Now, the Shabtai Zvi character, he studies some Lurianic Kabbalah. And from the study of the Lurianic Kabbalah, he had access to some of the highest esoteric mysteries. And, considering the fact that most of the people weren't familiar with the esoteric mysteries at that time, it was easy to perceive him as what you would call the Messiah. Now, the amount of Jews that believe that he was the Messiah is over 40% of European Jews. Okay? So, you got to imagine, millions and millions and millions and millions of Jewish people believed that the Messiah had come. They followed him to a T. Literally, they flogged themselves, beat themselves, whatever, etc., 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 etc. It's horrible. And he went his way to the Jerusalem, and he was rejected by the ruling elite of the Jewish practices there. They basically said, you need to get out of here. You're insane. You can't be here. So he was rejected. Ultimately, the Sultan of the time owned the lands of that area, and so he ended up going to the Sultan to seek basically acceptance for his prophetic messianic journey of sorts. And while he was traveling through on his ship through a certain sea of waters, they ended up capturing him. And when they captured him, they ended up imprisoning him, and they said like this: if you're the Messiah, if I cut your head off, you'll put it back on. Otherwise, you need to convert to Islam. So he ends up converting to Islam. While he was there, he found favor with the sect called the Sufis. And they formed a certain sect called the Dunme, which the Dunme don't call themselves Dunme, it's a derogatory term, in which they were called. Regardless of which, these mystical sects still practice and upheld aspects of Judaism, despite the fact that they themselves were in no way Jewish at this time. And many of the people, of course, who saw his conversion saw as like blasphemy, etc., etc., etc. Some people followed him, etc., etc., etc. So he ends up saying this. He ends up saying, like, if I'm the Messiah, right? If I'm not the Messiah can come in one of two ways. The Talmud says and the Zohar says, either the Messiah will come when we're in a world of world peace, or when we're at a world of complete darkness. And he said, well, since we're not all saints, let us all be sinners. Okay? So he introduced this philosophy, which is called the law of inversion. Basically, if the Torah said don't eat pork, it meant eat pork. Don't drink blood, drink blood. Don't kill, kill. Don't have relations with your parents, have relations with your parents, etc., etc., etc. This law of inversion basically took everything that the Holy Writings said not to do and inverted it to say that's what you need to do, because they believed essentially that this would cause the creator of existence to basically be forced to interact with the creation. So, of course, Shaphtai Zvi dies, and he proclaimed himself his messianic ship in the year 1666, which is 666 for those who are curious. And about 100 years passed by. Now we're in the late 1700s. There's another guy named Jacob Frank. He's one of the founding orders of the Bavarian Order of the Illuminati, alongside Mayer Amschel Rothschild and the other one. Regardless of which, our Jacob Frank character claimed to be a reincarnation of Shaphtai Zvi, and Shaphtai Zvi was already proclaimed to be the Messiah. So he, in turn, Jacob Frank proclaimed himself to be the Messiah, in which he then instituted all types of new rulings and laws. And he took the idea of redemption through sin and took it into like an absolute chaotic, right? They like created all types of like bestiality and like all kinds of horrible things I can't even tell you because I just blocked my account. I can't even tell you the things they did. Do some research and you'll see what I'm like telling you is the truth. And it's one of the founding members of the Bavarian Order of the Illuminati. Well, at some point, he mastered the art of causing all of this suffering, sorrow, death, etc., etc., etc. And he realized that essentially, like, okay, so every day they do these ritualistic acts of depravity, but ultimately, to what end does that avail, right? It's like holding a candle to the sun. It doesn't do anything. So ultimately, they realized that the only way to taint the planet was to cause the entire world to suffer. So they founded banking dynasties, which Mayer Amschel Rothschild is the founder of the Rothschild banking institution, etc., etc., etc. Began to target the financial institutions. Like I said, the Bavarian Order of the Illuminati was disbanded for accused of fixing a war by which they monopolized the Bank of England, like I was just saying. One of the Rothschilds were famously quoted for saying, he same forewarning, everything I'm about to tell you Don't eat fat, it means eat fat. Right? They practice inverting. One of the things Jacob Frank famously said was like when he proclaimed himself the Messiah, he said that he would never in his life tell the truth. So first off, if you were talking to a Sabbatean Frankist, you would never even know, because they would lie to you. Because they lie as a form of religious worship, right? They lie, they mislead, they do all of these things as a form of like basically bringing forth the Messiah, which is something that we can't really understand, because in our reality, we view reality as in terms of like logic and a heart-based consciousness, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But they don't believe that at all. They believe that, as I said, the Messiah can come one of two ways. He's famously said, like, since we can't all be saints, let us all be sinners. So he said, like one of the Rothschilds famously said, he who controls the money doesn't care about he who is in power, because he who is in power needs money. And so they control the financial wages, the rentals, situations, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And if you've ever seen the movie The Matrix, I have not seen the entire movie of The Matrix, but the concept of it essentially is like you have these machines that are basically feeding off these human beings or whatever. Basically, that's what they're doing. They believe that if they can cause the entire world to suffer, they'll force the creator of the reality to reveal himself. Because he'll have no choice but to intervene, because the entire reality will be in a state of complete destitution. Which is why you'll never save enough money to achieve whatever it is you're trying to achieve. You'll never be broken free from that little hamster wheel. You'll never stop being a little peon that runs on, would you like fries with that, or paper or plastic? And you'll never have enough money to survive and pay your rent. And you'll never have enough money to save up and pay your medical bills. You'll never have enough money to retire from. It's a complete illusion. And it's designed that way intentionally, because the same people that set and fix the financial wages are the same people that accept the housing wages, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's a very deep reality, right? So if you do your research on this, like Jacob Frank, who was one of the founding members of the Illuminati, like, don't just listen to me because some guy on TikTok is telling you this. Do your own research. Listen to what I'm telling you. Do your own research. Think for yourself. Don't just listen to some dude on a live stream. Regardless of which, it is as I've stated, and I give this warning that what I've told you is not to infringe upon your political beliefs. It can be chalked to a complete conspiracy theory. Regardless of which, I can tell you that in my own personal belief, I 100% believe this is exactly what's happening.